Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee Talk in the evening. And we are here like we are every Monday night since we've come back. And I'm here with my co-host, Louis Gracie. And we have a guest that's coming on. He's working on, there he is. He got his camera on. So we'll be talking to him. I'll let Louis introduce him, but let me turn off the jazz. I know y'all get down on the jazz, but we have something to talk about. So we'll come back later with the jazz, maybe. Okay, everybody, and like I said, welcome. And we're going to talk tonight about democratic socialists and progressives and established Democrats and all the things that encompass the Democratic Party. And, does it help or does it hurt? Or where are we going here? So I think one of the ways is to try to define it. And when I put in the title about progressives, that's sort of a broad term because a lot of people fall under that. The Democratic Socialists fall under progressives and some others maybe. And then you got the traditional or established Democrats that, a lot of people might be upset with and think they're not progressive enough or they don't attack Trump enough. But that's something we'll talk about. And we have some different opinions up here. But before we go a little further, because I wanted to play something for you to listen to, some audio. But before we go any further, I'm gonna let Louis introduce our other guests here tonight. And Louis, it's been a week, man. So how you been doing? It's always good to see you up there in the town. We miss you down here in Portsmouth, Virginia. But now you've been there so long, you're one of the Maryland people now. But there's no place like home, brother. Always remember that.
Well, people know me very well. They know when people say that, I always say I'm a Virginian first, and I'm a Maryland transplant. So my heart and everything is still in Portsmouth, Virginia.
We still connected with the DMC.
And I've been doing well. I escaped detection and apprehension at the Pentagon today, so I'm feeling pretty good. So let me introduce our guests for today. First thing I have to tell you that the young man before you is someone who I have been following since he was a sophomore in high school.
And been involved that long, huh? Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
And now he has finished.
So now he's a senior. He's a senior in high school.
He has
now,
finished college. And he's now in North Carolina doing some additional work, seminary type work. He's very closely associated with the Reverend Barber. But I want to tell you why this young man is so special. He's so special because everyone who's in politics locally here all claim him as their own. As their own. Carl Snowden claims he sent him to Lincoln University, where he went to first, to come back to lead Annapolis and everything. Then you got Mike Rogers does the same thing. He claims
HBCU.
Mike Rogers, he's been on our show before, and he's our delegate. He's been claiming this young man ever since I think at least junior high school, and he done worked closely with Mike. Also, Mr. Smith have worked on Capitol Hill. Was that 4 years or 3 years? You worked there?
No, it was a summer internship.
Yeah, and so he very well informed and very well connected in regards to what goes on Capitol Hill. But the main point is I want our audience to understand is that this is an exceptional young man. He's been exceptional ever since, even before high school. He has excelled at two colleges now. Like I say, he's out and doing some other things now. I joked with him the last time I saw him that he was doing seminary work. I said, man, you're supposed to be coming back here doing politics. What's going on? So this young man is very intelligent, he's very smart, and although he's not a socialist Democrat, he's well educated to talk on the subject today.
Okay, that's great. And before we go further, Brother Smith. Like I do when I do one-on-ones with people, I want to ask you this since you started so young. What were some of the influences when you were coming up now? It had to be some people around you at that young age, a sophomore in high school, and even before that. It could have been your family, could have been your pastor, it could have been Ned the wino. People laugh at that, but sometimes those winos that have some that they drop some knowledge in between the wine. But anyway, what kind of influences did you have that sort of guided you into what you're doing today?
Oh, certainly. I think it all starts at the home. I mean, my parents would always talk politics, kitchen table. The news would always be on the nightly news. And then my grandparents would tell me stories of segregation. I mean, we're from Maryland through and through. And, them coming up through the 60s and going to elementary school in the early 60s, late 50s, telling me how, white kids would throw rocks at them as they would ride past on the bus and they'd be walking to school and they had to fight sometimes, during desegregation. And how can you hear that, from people you love and not be motivated and a fire lit in you to do something? And I think even more so was the election of Obama. I was in kindergarten when Obama was first elected in '08.
Oh, wow.
President Obama. And, you see him climb to the top. Then it's eventually that glass ceiling has been broken. He said, well, I can do this. I can do this. And so I'm trying to do it.
Yes, right? We can.
Amen.
Yes, we. Yeah, and the other thing, with your grandparents, they're probably Lewis and our age, went through some of the things we went through. So do you see any similarities of the stories they told you? I mean, minus all the balance and everything, but the slick way that things are happening now, similarities to where they were trying to hold us back then, and what's going on now, coming from your young eyes, your perspective.
Yeah, well, I think that Jim Crow, we all know he got his law degree, now it's Jim Crow Esquire. I feel like that now it's more of a class war than anything. We talk about this in class a lot. I went to Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, as you heard. Now I'm at Yale Divinity School getting my master's.
Mm-hmm.
And, we talk about, well, why can't we, quote unquote, as a people, all step up and get together? And I say, well, it's a little more nuanced. I mean, you look at the Montgomery bus boycott, anybody, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, teacher, or Joe the wino, if you go on that bus, you got to get to the back of the bus. But, now we have it where if I make a little more money, I can get a little further in life. I can be a little more comfortable and I get these creature comforts. And, sometimes we can forget about the movement. And so I feel like that's how it's affected us. And two, I feel like it's the same. I mean, it's the same ugly racism. It's the same ugly discrimination, tactics. I mean, money, isn't it, through and through? So I would say there's been little change. I feel like just it's same song, different tune.
Yes, indeed. Sometimes we so busy living in the moment, we forget about the movement, and the movement is the permanent, strive for us to really be free. Anyway, so but before we get on the subject, I'm gonna play this some of this this audio here. Trying to explain a little bit about socialism, democratic socialism.
No
Well,
term is
socialism
misused in
in
American
general.
politics more than the word socialism. Liberals use it to describe countries like Norway and Denmark, while conservatives use it as a slur to criticize things like minimum wage increases and Medicare for all. Fox News once even used it to criticize billionaire investor Warren Buffett when he publicly supported raising taxes on the very wealthy.
Warren Buffett wrote an op-ed. Is he completely a socialist? Is Warren Buffett a socialist? You really have no clue what socialism is, do you?
Unfortunately, most Americans have no clue what
He sound like you, Lewis, with the language. But anyway, I'll play a little bit
socialism
more.
is
Then we
either,
get
and they
into
definitely don't know how democratic socialism fits into the whole picture. Even though traditional definitions of socialism don't actually fit the current political narratives in the US, let's take a look at where these terms came from. Historically speaking, socialism was seen as somewhat of a halfway point between capitalism and communism. Under this spectrum, democratic socialism fits somewhere in between capitalism and socialism. And the policies that Bernie Sanders and AOC are proposing, things like Medicare for all and free college, would fall somewhere between capitalism and democratic socialism, an area that
And you see, listening to that, one of the things and one of the reasons I want to have this show, and hopefully we'll have many more. And you're welcome, Brother Smith, to come back anytime. A lot of people don't really understand what it really is, which makes it easy for the right to play with it and just call everybody a communist. There are certain elements in raw socialism that's similar to communism, but it's a big difference between the two, especially when you add the democratic component to it. It even changes a little more from strict socialism. So one of the things, I hope people will take the time out to try to understand exactly what it is. You see all these democratic socialists winning all these primaries, and hopefully it pans out during the midterms. You know, but my question is, you have the established Democrats. Sometimes in many of those races, they were not supporting the Democratic Socialists, and they wanted to stay the traditional route, which is nothing wrong. You be with something that's been working, you want to stick with it, but you have to sort of compromise, in my mind, and that's where it comes. And what bothers me when we have some of the established Democrats that have an opportunity to come at Trump or answer questions, with a yes or a no, and then go into it. They're dancing around answers, and I think that's where a lot of the confusing comes, because the voters need to know exactly where Democrats stand, and they have to come together. Uh, you can have different ideas about how democracy works and how the Democratic Party should go, but it should be a unified effort in order to defeat. When you have people dancing around and not pulling together because your democratic socialist ideas might be a threat to them as far as how much money they get, from PACs, things like that. But that's just my thoughts on it. So, how do you guys feel? You feel like that one of the missing ingredients is people not really knowing the true definition of democratic socialists and progressives, and what their purpose is compared to the established democratic policies, which I think could come together and go hand in hand, and it's really necessary for that to happen in order to really defeat. We can't go into this midterm going different ways and have enough. If we get defeated on this one, which I don't think we have. I remember Lewis. Remember how confident we were about
Yes,
Kamala Harris.
yes,
Even though the odds were like they were, you and I we had several conversations on air, and we were kind of
yes.
confident that we were going to come out and vote, and we were going to rally around that. But that didn't happen. So even though it looks like you can't go with the polls, I know I'm rambling on, and I'll let you guys talk, but you still in the back of your mind have to excuse me be concerned about the outcome of the midterms, and how important it is. We can't skip in there like, oh, the polls say we're gonna be fine. And anyway, what do you guys think about that? What do we need to do? Because we like to have solution based conversations here. Even if it's your pure opinion of where we need to go. So go ahead.
Let Drake start.
Okay.
Well, I'll just say this and excuse the rain. It's currently raining in New Haven. If the Democratic Party wants to win in mass, you have to interact with voters in mass. What we saw as a mistake in the 24 election was we had all these new groups pop up, Black Men for Harris, and not saying let me not use that as an example, but all these groups saying X, Y, and Z for Harris, right? We're going to target quote unquote black men and whatever. But then they would hop on these Zoom calls and you would see it just turned into like a pissing match of sorts where you had them saying which fraternity is better, which fraternal organization is better, and these are like super D voters, right? They're going to vote every primary every single time from dog catcher all the way up to president. Those are the ones you got to worry about. You got to worry about, to use Brother Overton's at the beginning of top of the hour, Joe the wino, right? The ones that's hanging out on the street corners and have no political education whatsoever. So we need to start from basics. Folks don't know the three branches of government and the difference, and, who controls what, and, the difference between the state government and the federal government. I mean, I feel like we start there and say there's a reason the FAA, there's a reason your flight's getting in late, right? Folks all across the country are seeing flights being delayed. There's a reason we got all these foodborne illnesses popping up, and lettuce and jalapenos, and restaurants can't eat because when you cut federal services, that's what happened. That's what they were serving us by protecting us from these, bad actors everywhere. So I think what we see is a demonization of certain factions of the Democratic Party. I feel like we're not giving folks the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like there's an old guard, that's just hanging on to power. I'm not going to say any names, but we have all these, supergenarians that need to retire, right? And just make way or train up a new generation of young people to get them excited and find a new way forward. I mean, look at Mom Donnie in New York. Simple stuff that government can do. Keeping the lights on all night at the city parks. Now people have a place to do recreational activities, have criminal activities at night.
And safe, right.
And it's safe for the kids, for young adults, for working class people. Simple stuff like that. Or he has a system where the potholes are just getting fixed a little faster. That's good governance. And so I feel like when we start throwing out labels and just demonization, we need to ask ourselves, who is going to gain from these labels, right? The people in power, the people without the power. And I'm always looking to give power to folks that need it.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Go ahead, Louis.
Well, I want to tell you that one of the things about Drake is he's a nice guy, and he's been exposed enough to me to know that that I name names. I call people out, and I'm calling out Hakeem Jeffries right now, and I'm so pissed off with him. It's ridiculous because he's the person. I remember him when he was in the State House, and I love that guy. And now he's going to meet with Jared Kushner, of all people, behind closed doors, and then he's going to come out and give us a wishy-washy answer. You see, that's what Drake was talking about. He didn't want to call no names, but the truth of the matter is, he won't say it. I'll say it, old heads. We need to get rid of these old heads in office. And he's not old, but he's acting old now. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, all these old head people, they need to move aside and let the young folks take over. Because what the problem is now is that the social Democratic Party, Socialist Democratic Party, they are actually answering the questions that people are worried about. They are answering the questions. They're not looking to the Jewish lobby to say, is okay for me to say this, which is what the old head Democrats is doing, because a lot of them take their money from AIPAC. And whenever you're taking money from somebody, you owe them something. I don't care what anybody tell you. Is the truth. That is the truth. And if you don't have the independence on your own to resist that money, or at least if you're going to take it, you can say, look here, I take the money, but I'm not going to bow down to you. I'm going to still do what I think is right. And the problem that I see with the Democrats, regular Democrats, and you can see it. Like you saw, I wrote last week on this. I say you can already see the armor cracking because they're not supporting the Socialist Democrats. And the Socialist Democrats basically saying, hey, we're not gonna kiss your butt. We don't need to. The people are listening to us.
Yeah, and you're quite right there. And one thing about the old heads, being one of them, but I've always been sort of a progressive or old head, and I could very well agree with the Democratic Socialists and some of the things that they're trying to do. But one thing, it's good to have some of the old heads in there with the experience and wisdom, but they have to be at the point where they can move that way or understand it's different now. I think one of the problems with the old heads, it was just a few ways you could gain money. You had to depend on PACs or just about anybody, the Jewish coalition or anybody, in order for you to run a campaign. The younger people or the technology now, people know how to raise money through social media. And, if you got 375 followers and all you need to ask them for is $5 and you got a pretty nice nest egg, so that's probably the hold up. Most of the people from the traditional established, they had to take money from the different groups. And like you said, Lewis, once you take some of that money from them, you have to sort of do some of the things or you can't offend them or they'll pull that money back. And that's what we are. That's why we see all this dancing around, when you can answer a simple question, and show the people, the voters that, okay, you are in the fight and you're going to fight for us because the other side, the right is not fighting fair, and you don't have to go deep into the mud like them, but you got to go halfway there, like some of the Democratic socialists are doing, and call them out just like. And you see when they get called out, you see how rattled they get. They want to sue, and then you have a man that's in a position. He's going to call on the Justice Department. All right, check him out because he talked about my ears. What kind of shit? Okay, what kind of stuff is that? I almost went your way, Lewis. But what kind of stuff is that? So this is where we are now. And, at this point we are now, like I said earlier, you're going to have to squash all that differences and take that in the back rooms and come out in the public and really show the people that you're in the fight and you don't mind saying what you have to say, or step back and let the progressives or the Democratic Socialists say it all, and you just support them. Don't if you're afraid to lose that money that you're getting from the big PACs, and you don't want to say it, just let them say it and say you support them. If that causes you to lose money, so what?
That's
get
right.
on the train and learn how to raise money like technology gives us the opportunity to do now. $5 doesn't hurt anybody or
That's
more.
right.
But
It
when
doesn't.
you be looking for $100 or more from voters, especially nowadays when gas is like it is and everything like it is, you're gonna have a hard time raising that kind of money that you're used to getting from PACs. But you can get $5 and you got 400,000 people to 1 million people following you. That's gonna give you $5 or $1. You got everything you need. All you have to do is make sure that people want and you have their best interest in mind. I don't know what happens to some politicians when they get into the point. We had some, I'm looking at AOC now, how progressive she was, but seemed like she's pulling back a little bit on that, not so much as she used to be. I don't know if she has some aspirations because they look at it and say, well, in order for me to get to a certain point, I'm going to have to capitulate. Did I say that word right? I'm going to have to give in, bow in to the system in order to get there. And the Democratic Socialists are showing you don't have to do that to get elected.
You don't.
They're showing you that all over the United States in these different pockets that where they're winning and declaring who they are and who they're going after and what they plan to do, putting the people first.
Yes.
Whatever happened to
I wanted to follow up on because I wanted to throw something at Drake because he's half our age, so he can help give us his perspective on some things. But I wanted to say something quickly about the AOC. I have followed her and Bernie Sanders everywhere they have been, and I agree to a small part that she's beginning to pull back a little bit. But then, as soon as I think she's pulling back, then she give another speech, and
she'll come out.
She burns up everything. She goes right back to where she was. Now I do believe that people
that can be confusing to people.
It is.
Because
I know that people are telling her that she needs to chill, but that's the old heads talking. So, and I just hope she stopped listening because, like I said, she gets these great standing ovations. She goes back to where she originally was in many of her speeches, but then sometimes whenever she talks a certain way, and she's very expressive, as we all know. When her eyes go to the left, that means she's overthinking things. So I wanted to ask our young guest here, Drake, tell us. You have worked on a lot of campaigns locally. You have been in the back rooms with a lot of people. What do you think that either the old heads or the Socialist Democrats should be saying to people your age and younger to get them motivated for this upcoming primary and then 2028? Give us your view.
Right. I think the messaging all around should be this is not the end. I feel like a lot of people think this is as bad as it can get. So I'll stay home because it can't get any worse than this, but it can get a lot worse, and we're close to a precipice, falling off an edge, going to a dark place. We've seen it in other countries, right? Authoritarianism is here in the United States, right? And I feel like conversely, you also need to tell folks that we can go back to where we once were and get better. And I think in more progressive candidates, in socialist democratic candidates, you see that they're saying it doesn't have to be this way. I like outside out of Michigan saying like we can have Medicare for all. And of course they're going to be labeled as something that they're not. I mean, a heretic never calls himself a heretic. That's always from the establishment, right? Because they have something to gain by calling him a heretic, right? They can fearmonger. It's a shame that this is the only developed country in the world where healthcare is not a universal right? Education is not really a right in this country when you can just gut the Department of Education. That's a different story. And I'll also say the electability is one thing, and we do need to give all these candidates that have been elected a chance, at least a year in office, to see what they can do and what change they can make, because the wheels of government turn slow, but it's passability, right? What legislation can you pass? And I think we need to all look to Lauren Underwood, the representative out of Illinois, 18 pieces of legislation. I think she's one of the most, in these past few Congresses that have been hostile towards progressive ideologies. I think she's one of the more unsung heroes. I mean, you look towards, of how we can still get our policies enacted, right, under this hostile environment.
And that's what they go there for. That's what. Right. That's the purpose. Like that's why we vote for them to send there.
Right. I think a lot of talking heads get excited around elections. And we see that on like the mainstream news, get very excited around elections, but then there's no like accountability. Like, okay, you're in Congress, now what? People don't know now what, because we're not telling them what we want you to do, what legislation we want you to support. I don't want to give them credit, but the Republicans have ALEC. That's the multi-state, state legislature where they give them mock pieces of legislation, and all you have to do is put the name of your state on top of that piece of legislation, then you can submit it on their behalf. We need that. We need model legislation, and there are groups that are putting it out, but we need to say, hey, when we elect you, we want this model piece of legislation. We want you to, submit it for consideration for passage. I feel like that's how you need to move the needle forward. And I feel like you're not going to get anywhere when you're just anti-Trump. I'm not Trump, anti-Trump. Because the people that aren't voting for Trump aren't voting for Trump. And the people that aren't voting for Trump. You need to give them both a reason to vote for you. And I think we can't finger point. And this last point I'll say is that we can't be scared of new ideologies in the Democratic Party. Because, I mean, anyone that studied philosophy knows, Hegelian dialectics, right? The philosopher Hegel said, thesis, my idea, versus an antithesis, your idea, becomes a synthesis, a new idea, a new thing. So if we stop fighting and start, sitting at the table, okay, you coming at it from this point of view, I'm coming at it from this point of view, on the progressive side of the house, let's make something new where we both can come away with happy. Because I think the other thing people think politics is a winner take all game. It is. It's a blood sport. It's a winner take all game. But there's going to be some concessions, and I feel like we also need to strategize what we're willing to concede, because there's a lot of things we can take off the table, right?
Yeah.
That aren't as pressing right now. So
that won't kill us, presently.
Exactly.
But it might be something we need to, because we took it off the table now, we can bring it up later and say, hey, you remember when I did this? We need to, revisit this. And because it was a compromise done for that at that time, then later down the road, you can bring it back up and say, hey, okay, we did this compromise. But that component is kind of missing. And, I don't see why it just seems so simple. And you're right about, we should call out Trump, but that's not the whole fight. We elect our elected officials, and we sit there and we don't hold them account. They sit there the whole year, and the only time we start asking them questions again, many of us, is when the election time comes again, and we have no idea. We don't keep up with what they're doing in between elections. We don't know, are you sponsoring bills? Are you doing more than coming home and doing photo ops, for Facebook and YouTube and things like that? That's fine too. We like to know that you're in the community, but also bring some information about what you did for the community. And a lot of times we let that go because we get excited. We want to take a picture with representatives who somehow become celebrities, especially now with all the social media and more than 3 stations, people that you wouldn't normally hear about are celebrities, Let me play this real quick.
Something remarkable happened in 2024 that Democrats still haven't figured out how to fix. Young men, once a key part of their coalition, they bailed. And they didn't just stay home, they went to Donald Trump, which brings me to the Speaking with American Men Project, or SAM. They've got an urgent mission: win back a generation of men who feel ignored, ridiculed, and left behind. When Joy Behar said this on The View, the audience applauded, but many men heard something else.
Maybe these guys should spend their money on teaching men to not be such sexists. Maybe that's
But the stats don't bear that out now that
Thank
we've seen the election results.
Sam's research found that comments like that, widely shared online, feed a perception that Democrats see men as the problem rather than as part of the solution.
The response that we get is all too similar to George.
Okay. What do you think about that? Because and I don't agree that all young men went to Trump. Like you said earlier, Brother Smith. I think Drake. I think they stayed home, but and some did go to Trump. But those ones that went to Trump, they were going that way anyway because of family ties or just the misinformation that they just happened to get caught up in. But I mean, and you kind of addressed that just now, but is that something we really should be worrying about? I mean, are we reaching the young men like yourself? I mean, that you are kind of I don't want to call you unique because it's a lot of young men like yourself that are out there involved a whole lot, but it's a whole lot out there that not keeping up and don't care, don't know. But and let me bring this one other point up: why the Republicans or the right, they know exactly what to go after in order to stop us in our tracks before we even think about history. The more you know about your history, and you just quoted something, the more you know about your history, the more you tend not to repeat it. So that's why they're trying to eliminate it and take it out of the schools or take it out of the museums and all that. So the young people won't be exposed to it and say, wow, sure don't want that to happen again. So I just had to throw that in. But go ahead,
Yeah, let
Lewis
me double
or
up on
Drake.
that question. The same question that you asked Drake, and Drake, I hope you retain what he asked you. I just want to add another question to it in the same vein. Is uh, in your movement around younger people, what are we not? What is this the old heads or the other the progressive Democrats? What are they not saying, or what could they be saying to get them motivated? Because we have had this conversation ourselves about the information not getting down to the hood. We got people in the hood that just simply 100%. You worked in the projects with me, not with me, but with Mike and other people. You knocked on the doors and you've heard the stupid comments that came out of mouths of some of our people. What, in addition to what James asked you, what do you think we need to do to get the word down and get the people in the hood up and motivated?
All right. Well, I would just start with the lens in which we're viewing this from. Brother Bracy, I know how you talk. You keep it real, right? You put it where the goats can get it. But I feel like, just in your dialogue, and we probably hear people in these backroom strategy meetings saying it worse. I don't think we should view when we come to someone's door and they say something that they're not cut up on stupid, right? And I don't think we should view Black people that live in lower development homes as unmotivated voters, right? Because something's motivating them to get up and work, right? Or get up and sign up for whatever benefits they're getting, right? Something is motivating them to not literally be in bed all day, right? To get up and at least, a lot of people in low, are working, sending their kids to school, whatever. That's the motivating factor. And I feel like we just need to start with that, right? Speak their language. You cannot go and start immediately talking about foreign affairs. You need to start with domestic policy. You cannot go and start talking about environmental issues when I see concrete all around me, right? Not saying those aren't important, but you got to dial it and tone it in. And you start saying, listen, they're going to cut some benefits. The schools are a certain way because of voter apathy. I feel like you really got to sit with them. And I feel like what we see that works well in Maryland is when you're there in a non-election year. I feel like the same conversation we're having during the election year, win, lose, or draw, you need to go back in the quote-unquote off years and have the same forums, conversations, and then you can put together an agenda that will become model legislation that you can present to your to your candidates, who hopefully get across that finish line. But another thing I'll say about young men, I think we forget a qualifier. It's young white men that voted for Trump en masse. They tried to spin it on Black men saying we were the problem, but there was only a 1% difference from 2020 to 2024.
A high percentage of Black men,
right, that voted for Harris, overwhelming. And we're not monolithic, right? And I feel like instead of demonizing those, try and figure out why. We can, and maybe they're ill-informed, and we say, look, he doesn't have your best interests at heart, and the clip you played, Brother Overton, what I hear from that is I'm seeing a false dichotomy where they're pitting white male voters going for Trump because of a quote unquote feminist leaning attitude in the Democratic Party. And I feel like that is a false dichotomy that we shouldn't play into, because then we'll see even more infighting. Like, men have to lose in order for women to gain, or vice versa, when there's enough resources for all of us to go around when it comes to gender equality. So I feel like gender equality is not the reason we're using young men. I feel like we're using, and this is speaking anecdotally, I don't have any charts or graphs or numbers in front of me. I feel like we're losing young men because we just let them slip by the wayside, and we haven't given them anything to vote for. I look at the King book behind you, and King said, I'm paraphrasing, in the South, people can't vote, and in the North, people feel like they don't have a reason to vote. So we need to just give people the reason to vote. And I feel like we shouldn't play into these false dichotomies of, well, people aren't voting because X, Y, and P, X, Y, and Z. No, people aren't voting because we're not reaching out to the people that need to be voting.
Yeah, and that's why I played that and some of the other audios I played, because they're good at putting those out, and they sound like it's coming from a place of study or great knowledge, but it's really misleading. But to a person that doesn't pick that up, it sounds they have achieved what they wanted to achieve, and it's a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the young people are on Facebook and
Yeah,
those places.
there's a lot of extra
do you think?
noise. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a lot of extra noise, and we also got to be wary of AI. AI can make
Yeah,
it where any of us say something we did not say.
Yeah, I just did a AI thing. It's a bunch of us guys that in my neighborhood, and we get together once a month. All of us are in our 70s, and we took a picture, and I took that picture and got all of us dancing. None of us can do that.
Yep.
None of us can do that now because all of us got doctors, knee doctors, and hip replacements. But I did it as a joke, but then it kind of scared me. I said, "Man, look what you can do with that." But anyway, that's another show. Hey, Drake, do you think we are, especially when it comes down to some elections? Now, we proved some things in these last primaries, but we have to, like James Brown would say, we have to take it to the bridge now. And you think, in some of these elections and some of these candidates listen to the wrong strategists, because they might be coming out of a big company or something like that, rather than listening to somebody like you that is coming from a place of a lot of people, but somehow they kind of miss out on that. And well, in past elections, I think we kind of getting to the point where we're listening more, or well, at least the Democratic Socialists are listening, because a lot of them, when they heard that they're not talking enough to black media, or they're not going into where the black voters are, you see them doing that now, and that's showing that they at least they're listening.
Right.
But some of our established people, they think that no, I need to be, and I see this happening locally in local elections. Then no, I'm gonna go over here because I know I got their vote. And I was a campaign manager for a candidate one time. He lived in a certain neighborhood. He didn't want to canvass there because he knew everybody knew him. I said, well, let's go out there anyway. 2 blocks away from his house, lady didn't know who he was. So it made sense for us. And it's one of the biggest neighborhoods in our city where you can win or lose from the votes out there. So that's the point I'm making. We got to be able to listen to the people that know where the votes are and know where the issues are. And you were exactly right. We don't want to hear about, foreign affairs every day. We're concerned about what happens, but what about my neighborhood? What about things that are going on in my state, in my neighborhood?
You got to build up.
Go ahead.
Right. What you're saying is, what I'm saying is, we have to build up the political muscle in our brains to go from local to state to federal to international. It doesn't happen, right? And we all know that if it follows, if I want something good in my country, I'm not going to support something bad in another country, right? I mean, from a democratic perspective, right? Democratic Party is not supporting, at least at this junction, right, a forever war in Iran. We're not the war hawks in Congress. But going back to your point, heat wave has struck the ghetto. and the black man has ice, but some man said the white man's ice is colder. And we keep seeing that day in and day out, where people skip over black radio, black media. Um, I know you listen to Clay Kane. I see his book right behind you, Burn Down Masters
Yeah,
House.
I listen to
Seems like
all
once
that.
a week he's talking about how many people he's invited on that he's not heard back from. Him,
Right.
Aaron Hunter, Greg Carlin, I can't, right? They
Greg Carl,
invite all
yeah,
these
all
folks
them
on that do not come because they're either scared or they don't pay us any mind, which is a mistake. I also said,
And you're talking, you go on places like that, you're talking to a lot of people, and the people that listen there, you're talking to people that pay to listen to these guys. So if they're paying to listen to these guys, they they really
invested.
follow them and really believe in what they're doing. So you got a bunch of listeners that really believe in these people, or they don't have to listen. They not. You don't have to pay. You're not going to pay to listen to somebody you don't believe in. And so the weight that they carry, and hopefully people will wake up. You see the Democratic Socialists going on those shows and making the circuits on there. But the people, we need the Jeffries and the established Democrats going on there and talking to the people. So we won't be confused about where you coming from, man. Because all we see you on CNN avoiding the answers. And when you come to us and tell it like it is, brother.
Right,
So we can know, so we can make educated choices.
Right, but you will see there is a chronic avoidance of the black intelligentsia because
Right.
we will hold you to the fire, and
Right.
we will demand answers and the answers on the inaction, that you as an office holder, have been.
Doesn't mean we don't love you, but we're gonna hold you accountable, just like members
Love you
of a
enough.
family love each other, but they hold each other accountable, when something is not right. But
Baldwin said
go
it
ahead,
about
I'm
the
sorry.
U.S. I love America, and I love her enough. Speaking of America, to criticize her, right? Because I want you
Yeah.
to do better. That's Baldwin's
Right,
words.
right.
Again, I'm paraphrasing, but going back to do I feel like some of these candidates are misled? Of course. I mean, when you have some of these, polling at 1%, running for governor or president, people you never heard of, been in Congress for 2 terms, and they think they can just jump in, and they've neglected the local issues, and now they want to run for national issues and run for president.
Yeah.
Of course, because there's money. It's a business, money to be made.
It's a business.
But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, the people that are these political analysts, political strategists, consultants are so far removed from everyday people and everyday needs. I was at Yale. We had a discussion on AI, and we brought in an author from Harvard, and she had wrote a book. And folks were saying that AI is the future and it's going to just benefit us so much. Anyone against AI is against, whatever and whatever. And I said, I just saw on the nightly news that one of the automotive companies has created AI robots, and they're testing them. I wonder how they're testing these AI robots. They're having them do the same functions a human can do, the same basic task of, taking a beam and inserting it somewhere else. And then they close the clip by showing the person whose job it is to take that same beam. And I said, this is going to take jobs and just make that gap wider. So I said, we're sitting in a place at Yale, and of course we can have these theoretical conversations till the cows come home about how great this is and what we need to do, and how if you're not on board with this, somehow you're anti science and human advancement. But Yale is in New Haven, Connecticut, right? New Haven, Connecticut has some impoverished areas. If you keep taking these jobs away because you think human advancement is the way of the world, and robotic advancement is going to make everyone's life whatever, I can show you where all these other scientific advancements haven't done anything for folks that live in these poor areas, these poor neighborhoods. We say this at the Divinity School: if it doesn't work in the ghetto, it's not gospel. So we need to say, if it doesn't work with the poor, it's not politics. I go to divinity schools. I'm gonna take it there. Jesus started his ministry back home. Where is back home? Nazareth. We all remember that the psalmist, the prophet said, "Will anything good come out of Nazareth?" Right? Nazareth was inner city, whatever. Insert, city. It was the inner city. Jesus started there for a reason. Because I have good news for the poor. We need these politicians to go in and say, "Look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to listen from you, and let me bring good news to you. Then we'll get a reason to vote." So I feel like, yes, a lot of these politicians are misled. I'm not going to criticize her, but I'll criticize whoever told her to do this. Right before the election, Madam Vice President Harris, I saw her on the news knock on one door in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was like a nice photo op. And I said, why would they send her to knock on a door in Reading, Pennsylvania, where she can talk to one person and maybe get the legacy media to take a picture of her, when they could have sent her to one of the two HBCUs, Lincoln or Cheney, where you have hundreds of students are going to vote for Harris and then call the folks back home and tell them to do the same. Guess who I just met? Guess what you need to do tomorrow? You need to go out and vote. We had Harris in Pittsburgh go to a sandwich shop just because Trump was denied. You remember this when Trump was denied entry into a sandwich shop in the Pittsburgh area? Mm-hmm. Harris went to it the next week to kind of one-up him. I said, so you shut down a sandwich restaurant for petty points? That's a fundraising line. So a lot of the stuff is done so they can spend it to fundraise, not to vote yet. So yes, there's a lot of people sending our politicians and our candidates wayward because win, lose, or draw, at the end of the day, these consultants get paid.
Yeah.
Well, James, do you see why we have this young man on the show?
Yeah, and that's what I've been wanting.
Am I right? Isn't he smart and isn't he brilliant?
You're quite right. Just like a lot of our young people, and that's why I'm glad this is just the beginning of having some young people like yourself. And like I said, you're welcome each time. I always joke. I went to Virginia Union, and they have a school of theology, the Samuel Proctor School of Theology there. And I always, of course, I didn't go there, but my undergrad, all my roommates end up being preachers or going to that. And I always told them, I said, man, I would love to be a fly on the wall in one of those theology classes, hearing the students talk about books of the Bible, with all the different questions that might come out and all the different interpretations and things like that. So I'm sure it's just like that at Yale, those conversations. I would just like sit in there invisible and just see y'all talk it out. But, and that's the kind of thing we need as far as accountability, holding, these people we elect, just because we like them. And if they get offended because we hold them accountable, we know what to do next time election time comes up, because we put you there and we're going to hold you accountable because we tell you that. And if we don't, that's how they slide, and they be in there 3 and 4 and 10 terms because nobody ever questions, their vote or what they're doing, or how many policies, how many bills have they introduced and passed. Even just introducing them, all of them are not going to get passed. But what kind of work are you doing? And a lot of times we don't know that, and that's when they come on the black media and talk about those things. And there's time to talk about Israel and stuff like that, but tell us what you're doing. And that's what we do here locally, and I have somebody scheduled tomorrow morning that's running for city council, and I've had a few in the past. And I asked them the questions, and one of the questions I asked them in the end locally, and I asked all of them this: do you feel that the voters, with the climate we're in now, political climate we're in now, do the voters locally need to know your party affiliations, or how you feel about local politics? Are you a Trumper? Or are you a Democrat? Because some voters that might matter, locally, because a lot of the things that's happening these days locally are trickling down I mean, not locally, but nationally, are trickling down, in a big way to hurt, especially a black community. With the funds that they are cutting for education and things like that. So that's a question I asked each one of them, and at one point it didn't matter because you just wanted your pothole fixed on your street or you know your tax rate lowered and things like that. But nowadays we got administration up there doing things that is affecting us locally. So I think voters locally might want to know that.
Yeah.
Might want to know that. It might not be important to all, but some it's important to me. I'll put it that way. If you're running locally and you believe in everything Trump does, I'm not
Yeah.
coming near you.
No,
That's just me. And it might
Yeah.
be some people to
Yeah.
the right that won't go near a Democratic policy. So anyway, I just
Speaking
had
of
to
that,
throw that in.
and speaking of that, James, I'm glad you brought up the local part because this is another thing that because I really want to pick the brain of Mr. Smith Drake today. I really want to pick his brain because I don't know if I can kidnap him again. So I want to bring up a local thing that happened. Yes, Drake was in the rain in our most recent local election, and he knows how disgustingly horrible the turnout was. I think they did the final number was like less than 17% of the people voted in our area. First, I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, considering that we had some new candidates that was running like Reverend Tillett against an
Change.
old established person backed by Pam. Give us your opinion of what happened here locally, because I know because it applies everywhere, really, when you have a bad turnout. What caused the bad turnout in your view? And also in your view, what do they need to do for coming up here in the November election? Those are two questions I have for you.
Right, right. And just for the viewers, he's talking about Anne Arundel County, Maryland, home to the state capital of Annapolis. We had a Democratic primary mid-June, I think right around Juneteenth. We had our right after Juneteenth, I think. Long story short, I would just start by saying those that follow politics know that off-year elections, and I mean off-year election, a non-presidential election, is always going to have a lower voter turnout than a presidential election because the top of the ticket is what draws excitement for the rest of the ticket. So in Maryland, it's an off-year election. It's a gubernatorial election. Governor Moore is up for re-election. He's the incumbent of the Democratic Party. He had no Democratic challenger, to my knowledge. So one, that's going to stop Democrats from coming out because they say, what's the point? I'm going to support him in the general election. Moore is going to make it through to the general election from the primary. So that's why we see a poor voter turnout. It's non-presidential and it's a non-contested gubernatorial election. These are some of the nuances we have to say so we're not wasting our breath. But also, we need to realize that money is always an issue, and first-time candidates are always going to have a harder time than incumbents. And a lot of these first-time candidates we saw were going against some incumbents with serious dollars. And I feel like, without getting into the nitty-gritty, because I'm getting hyper-local right here, and I know this is a Virginia-based show. Shout out Virginia. My sister went to Virginia State.
Bravo.
Trojan explosion. Uh-oh. Made a face. Uh-oh. The man from Union made a face. Oh.
Yeah.
But I'll say that you're not surprised when you see a number like that. And it can always be better. I'm not saying that you should be apathetic and that you should say, okay, I'm happy with 17%. No. But you should always say it's going to be lower in a non-contested gubernatorial year and a non-presidential, non-general election, presidential election year. So that's just some of the just high-level overview of why I think. But I was sad to see some of these new candidates win because they were going to bring some fresh air. But there's an election every year, and I don't think some of these candidates are, I would say, youthful spirits. How about that? So they can always come back and run again, like you, Brother Brace. You have a youthful spirit, so they can always come back, and we'll see them in the
Yeah,
future.
sometimes it makes you stronger.
Right. Right.
You come back
learn-
with a different approach, and makes you stronger. The people that really hang in there and come back, some people go away and you never see them again. And sometimes I question them in the first place, but that's on them. But the people that come back, I've seen them come back after 3 or 4 losses, and that really showed me this person is determined to really represent the people if he comes back that many times.
And I think
Anyway,
oh yeah.
No,
I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
quickly. I don't know how much time we have. I'll say quickly an example of that for folks that are frustrated with local election losses and first-time candidates losing. I mean, there's an example out of the '90s. I think a guy from Chicago lost an election for Congress. He's going against a man named Bobby Rush. Bobby Rush was party in Congress, former Black Panther. This guy didn't give up. He was a state senator. Somehow he ran for the United States Senate. Then he did something else later on, and he just opened up a museum in Chicago. Let me see, what was his name?
What was his name? Was he a two-termer? Was he a
Who could that
two-termer?
possibly be?
I think he was.
Nobel laureate.
Yeah.
Lost his first federal election, and he 20 years later opens up his presidential library and museum. So, in the immortal words of Jesse Jackson, you just gotta keep hope alive.
Yeah, you got to keep hope alive. Even his wife, his eventual wife, turned him down for the first date, so he kept coming back.
So he had to propose 3 times. So
yeah.
Hey, James, before we move on, because I want our audience to do some homework, especially those people who have a problem understanding the difference between communism and a socialist Democrat. Study Holland, study Denmark, study Switzerland, Sweden. Study those countries. Finland. Study the countries that are already doing practicing social democracy, so to speak, and check out where their tax money is going to. And to me, you and I, we went to a great school. We was taught the difference between communism and socialism when we was in school. And it's a shame that kids today, I've ran into some, don't know the difference. And then, like you said earlier, James, how they going to keep throwing socialism and communism in the same barrel. It's not the same barrel. The barrel is, look at non-functioning Russia, look at non-functioning North Korea. I can't say non-functioning China because of the way they are, but if it wasn't for Hong Kong and stuff, they'll be in the same barrel. Look at these non-functioning countries that still practice communism. Look at what happened to Cuba. Why Cuba is in that horrible situation that they're in now. Communism always just looking up for the top people who start things, and they tell people things gonna trickle down, but it never trickle down. Socialism it starts from the very beginning because they don't allow the oligarchs to feel as though they're gonna run the country. That's the first thing, and they're gonna tax the hell out of them. And so I'm just breaking it down that simple. But I want people to do your own homework, study countries that are already doing it, and see how those people, see what their lives are like, see how happy they are. I think they say in Finland and Denmark, they're some of the happiest countries on the planet. So, and then the other thing I want to add to that is the military budget. Look at the military budget of all the socialist countries, and you look at the waste, the total absolute waste that we are doing in this country, which is in the trillions of dollars. And when they keep talking about they can't give somebody health care, you can take care of the health care of the American people if you don't build one aircraft carrier. You look at how much an aircraft carrier costs. You can take care of the health care of the American people with one aircraft carrier. Why do we need jets? More jets. And the last I want to add to that is something that I learned in college when I first went to college. One of my professors said, why do you need to have a military budget when you have bombs that can destroy the world already? Why do you even need to keep building your military? You have the bombs. If you see what I'm getting to, is that you already have the power to destroy the world. If you have the power already to destroy the world, do you need to keep building up your military? Do you need to do that? And that's one of the things that the socialist Democrats are answering, and the regular Democrats are running away from the issue. No, and I'm a military person. You know, we grew up in military town. I know how important the military is. But what's important to the military are the people. The munitions is not important. The armament is not important. The jets, useless jets, are not important. The people in the military are what is important, and you taking care of those people. That is what is important. And that is what they tell you in these socialist countries that do have military and do have civil groups together. They deal with what is important. And to me, when you can already destroy the world, you don't need to keep spending more money on taking care of 2% of the United States population.
Yeah, and as we close out, just think about how effective you repeating communism every day. Think about people in Florida, particularly Miami, and you have a big Cuban community there, and you throw out communism to them. Most of them, their families escaped communism from their own country, and you throw out communism enough to them, they're not going to vote for any candidate that they're throwing. They have been accused of being a communist because if they don't do any other work,
You hope so. You hope so.
They're not going to vote for that person. So that's what they're doing, just throwing it out there, hoping that people don't really look at the differences between the two, and all of a sudden they start throwing out communism. They just their strategy is amazing sometimes when you think about it, but we could be just as cunning as them if we want to. And I think we kind of going in that direction, and some of the established Democrats are going to have to come along, because that's going to be, they see what's winning, what's resonating with the voters. And if that is that progressiveness and fighting fire with fire and making sure the issues that matter are the issues that are talked about and that are dealt with, so. Anyway, we want to thank you, Drake, for coming in, and we want, like I said, come back and bring some of your younger friends so we can have a panel discussion with them. I always want to hear what some of the younger minds, how they're thinking about things. I'm never too old to be educated and to be indoctrinated by something that I might not have seen it that way, but if someone has a good enough argument, they can convince me to go the other way. But right now, I think I'm going the right way. I'm on the left. I'm moderate, but I also feel we need to hold our people accountable to the point in public, so everybody can see. And just dancing around answers is not the way to at least gain my vote. Anyway, so any last words from you, Drake, before we sign off here tonight?
And Drake, tell us what you're doing now.
Oh, I wanted to ask them too.
Where you at now? Tell us what you're doing now, and just give us some insights. What's in Drake's world, real quick.
Yeah, and include how did you hook up with Reverend Barber? Go ahead.
So currently I am entering my second and final year of my Master of Arts in Religion program in Divinity School, and I met Reverend Barber because I led a march 66 miles on foot. We walked from Lincoln University of Pennsylvania to Harrisburg, because Lincoln was owed $19 million in funding from the state of Pennsylvania. And our appropriation had not passed, and this was 2023. And I did that in March, and it was 14 of us, and we went there, and we met with all the folks we needed to meet to, and they got there on a Monday. It passed the Senate committee on a Tuesday. It had already passed the House before. It was just held up in the Senate. So it passed the committee on Tuesday, passed the full Senate on Wednesday, and Governor Shapiro signed it into law on Thursday. Then, in that February, after November, Reverend Barber came up to Lincoln, and he told me all about the program he runs, public theology and public policy, looking at political issues through a Christian and moral lens, theomoral lens. And, we've always asked the question, what would Jesus do? But we asked the question, how would Jesus vote? And a lot of these things we see, he wouldn't be doing it. So that's what I'm doing. So currently I'm just, finishing up here. Semester starting, and orientation is tomorrow. So very excited.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And Lewis, somebody said he's sorry he was late coming on. That Raymond Coleman Jr.
Yes.
He's
the guy I've been trying to get on the show ever since we started. I ain't gonna talk about him right now, but he put some words there, and I saw it. So thanks, Raymond. Thanks everybody in my family who sent in some words, and Kookie. That's what we call him. We really appreciate you checking in and listening, as well as all the audience. And thank you very much for listening to this program and getting inside the head of a young person that we brought on just for this occasion.
Yes, indeed. And thanks again for watching, and make sure you share with this our YouTube, and you'll be able to see this if you weren't here live. See it on our YouTube, and we'll be making some shorts that will be picking up some of the important points that were made here tonight, and share those for those people that can't watch for over an hour because it's so much content for you to watch. But you can see our shorts, and maybe it'll lead you back, but those shorts will have some of the most important points made here tonight. So we appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. And thanks for your support. And always remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share. And remember to be aware, be informed, and most of all, be involved. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Be our guest on the Horseman